Hey guys, welcome to the channel again. First of all, welcome to my new office. In these days I had a little bit of reorganizing of my furniture and I got a new desk here. And I had also some problems with my PC with the ventilation and stuff, so I took the chance to build a new machine with some new parts, as you can see here. And right now it works really well. So for this tutorial, as I said in the last video, we are going to install Arch Linux with a root and a home partition, with the home partition on a separate hard drive. So let's get started.
So there we go, I have now the image mounted and I logged into the installer. And the first thing I'm going to do is to check if I have an internet connection. So I'll type in IP space A. And as you can see there, I have an IP on the interface number 2, which is my Ethernet connection, which ends in 186. And this is because I have connected an Ethernet cable through VirtualBox. If you have Wi-Fi right now, you will type in Wi-Fi-menu. And when you hit enter, you will see a list of networks. You can select yours, enter the password, and you'll have an IP as well. So I'll delete this command here. Then once we have an IP, the first thing we do is to synchronize the time with the internet. So we'll type in time, date, CTL, space, set, dash, NTP, space, true, and hit enter. There you go. So I'll clean up the terminal. And now I'll type in lsblk. And as you can see there, we have two disks in this system. One is SDA, which is 128 gigabytes, and SDB, which is 256 gigabytes. So I want to install actually the system on the SDA drive for 128 gigabytes, and I want to use SDB as my home partition, which is going to be 256 gigabytes. So that means if something happens to the system, I can reinstall Arch Linux on SDA and my user data on SDB will be untouched, and I can just remount the partition in my system and everything will be there. So let's begin formatting SDA. Because this is a UEFI system, I need to create an EFI partition, and I will create also a root partition. Later, I will create also a swap file. And then format SDB with an ext4 file system, and then when I will create a home directory, I can mount SDB in there. So let's begin with SDA. So the first thing we are going to do is to type in fdisk/dev/SDA and hit enter. And I want to make sure that I create a GPT label in this case because it's a UEFI system. So I'll type in G and hit enter. And now I want to create the first partition on the disk is going to be my EFI partition. So I'll type in N for new and hit enter. I'll accept the default number 1 for the partition number. So I'll just hit enter. And I'll accept also the default for the first sector. So I'll just hit enter here. And I want the partition to be around 500 megabytes. So I'll type in plus 500 capital M and hit enter. And I don't worry about the Linux file system right now because I'm going to format the partition anyway later. So I'll type in now N for new and hit enter. Accept the default for number 2 and hit enter. Accept the first sector and hit enter. And for the last sector, I accept the default as well because I want the partition to take the remainder of the disk. So I'll just hit enter here. Now the last thing is we need to write the changes to the disk. So I'll type in W and hit enter. And now the partition table has been written to the disk. So I'll clean up the terminal and type again lsblk. And as you can see there, we have now SDA1 of 500 megabytes and SDA2, which is around 128 gigabytes. Now let's also partition SDB. There we need to create only one partition, which is going to be our home partition. So let's type in again fdisk/dev/SDB and hit enter. And again, I'm going to create a GPT label. So I'll type in G and hit enter. And then I'll type in N for new and hit enter. I'll accept the default partition number 1. This is the only partition on the drive, so I'll hit enter. I'll accept the default for the first sector by hitting enter, and also for the last sector by hitting enter because I want this partition to be the remainder of the disk. So just hit enter here. And now let's just type in W and hit enter to write the changes to the disk. And I can clean up the terminal and type again lsblk. And as you can see, we have now also SDB1, which is going to be then our home partition. So now we partition the disks. Let's now format them. So let's begin with SDA1. SDA1 is our EFI partition, so it has to be a FAT file system. So let's type in then mkfs for make file system dot, and then the file type, so FAT for FAT, and then which FAT file type. So let's type in dash capital F32 because it's a FAT32 file system, and then the partition name, so /dev/STA1, and hit enter. Now let's format also STA2, and let's type in mkfs dot, and then the file system type in this case is ext4, so we'll type in ext4, and then the partition name, so /dev/STA2, and hit enter. There you go. Now we can format also SDB1 by typing in mkfs. Again, it's going to be an ext4, so we'll type in again ext4, and then the partition name, so /dev/SDB1, and hit enter. So I'll clean up the terminal. Now we formatted the partitions. I'll type in shortly again lsbrk. Now we can proceed to the mounting. So the first thing you want to do is to mount SDA into the mount partition, which is going to be the partition where the system is going to be installed. So let's type in mount, then the partition name /dev/SDA2 space, and then the installation partition, which is /mount, and hit enter. Now we need to mount the SDA1 partition, which is our UEFI partition, into the UEFI directory, which is not existing yet. And I like to put actually the UEFI directory under the boot directory just to remember it also visually. But both the UEFI partition and the boot partition are not existing yet, so we need to create both. In order to create two directories at once, we'll use this command mkdir -p and then /mount, which is already existing, of course, and then the two partitions we need to create, so /boot/UEFI, and hit enter. And now we can mount SDA1 onto this UEFI partition. So let's type in mount, the partition name, so /dev/SDA1 space /mount/boot/UEFI, and hit enter. Now SDB1 is our home partition, and for this we need to create a home directory in the system. So let's type in mkdir for make directory. Again, the installation is under /mount, and the directory we want to create is home, so /home, and hit enter. And now we can mount SDB1 into the home directory. So let's type in mount, then partition name /dev/SDB1 space, and our home directory, so /mount/home, and hit enter. Now I'll clean up the terminal and I'll type in again lsbrk. We'll see our mount points there. We have SDA1 on the UEFI directory, SDA2 is on mount directory, and SDB1 is on our home directory. So everything looks good. So now that we mounted the partition, we can proceed to the base install. And remember, the base install is going to be on SDA2. So we are going to type in now pacstrap /mount, because this is the installation directory, and then the packages you want to install. So in my case, base, then Linux, which is going to use the latest Linux kernel, then Linux-firmware, and then an editor, which I'll need later, in my case, Nano. And then just hit enter. It's going to take a moment to download the packages, and I'll be back when it's done. So there you go, the packages are now installed, so I'll clean up the terminal. And now we need to generate the FStop file where all our mount points will be included. So we'll type in gen FStop -U /mount, and then twice the major than sign, then again /mount/etc/FStop, and hit enter. Now let's see the content of FStop just to make sure that our mount points are all in there. So we'll type in cat /mount/etc/FStop, and hit enter. So as you can see there, we have our first partition, SDA2, which is the root partition, the installation partition. Then we have SDA1, which is our UEFI partition, and SDB1, which is our home partition. So everything looks good, and we can clean up the terminal and move now into the installation and leave the installer. So to do this, we'll type in arch-root /mount, and hit enter. As you can see, the login prompt changed now. We are now into the installation. So the first thing we are going to do is to create the swap file. So let's type in fallocate -l, and then the size of the swap file. In my case, I want it to be 2 GB, so I'll type in 2 GB, and then space /swap file, and hit enter. Now we need to change the permissions of the swap file so that it can be read. So we'll type in chmod for changing permissions, and then 600 reading permissions, and then /swap file, and hit enter. Then we need to create the swap by typing in mkswap /swap file, and hit enter. And now finally we can activate the swap by typing in swap on /swap file, and hit enter. Now we need to put the swap file in the FStop file we created before. So we'll type in nano, the editor we installed before, /etc /FStop, and hit enter. We'll move down to an empty space here and we'll type in /swap file space none space swap space 0 space 0. And then Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. So now we can proceed to the localizations. And the first thing we need to do is to adjust our local time. So we'll type in ln-sf/user/share/zone info /Europe in my case, and /Zurich in my case, and then a space, and then /etc/local time, and hit enter. Now we can synchronize the hardware clock to the system clock, so we'll type in HW clock space --sys to HC, so system to hardware clock, and hit enter. All right, now we need to work on the locale.gen file, so we'll type in nano /etc/locale.gen, and hit enter. We'll scroll down until we find the locale we want. So in my case, I'm looking for English US. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to have probably 2 of those. And the one I need to select is the one which has UTF-8. So I just uncomment this line by deleting the hashtag. And then again, Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. Now we can generate the locales by typing in locale-gen and hit enter. And let me clean up the terminal. And now we can also edit the configurations file. So we'll type in nano /etc/locale.conf and hit enter. And we enter this string, so lang, all in capital letter, equal, and then the locale we choose before. So in my case, it's en_us.utf-8. And then Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. Now we can proceed to the host name and the hosts. So we'll type in nano /etc/hostname. So here you can choose a name for your machine. In my case, I will just choose Arch. And then Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. Then we can also edit the hosts file. So I'll pull up the previous command with the up arrow and replace hostname with hosts, and hit enter. And I'll scroll down to the empty line and type in 127.0.0.1 tab localhost. Next line, ::1 tab localhost again. And then in the last line, 127.0.1.1, then a tab, then the host name, so in my case Arch, and then .local domain, and then a tab, and then the host name again, so in my case Arch. You replace this accordingly to what you chose before, and then Control O and enter to save the file, and Control X to exit the editor. So now we can create the password for the root user, so we'll type in passwd and hit enter. Then a new password, and retype it. So now we can proceed by installing the grub bootloader and some other networking tools. So we'll type in pacman-s. Then the first package is grub. And because it's an UEFI system, we'll need to also install UEFI boot mgr, UEFI boot manager. Then we can install network manager, and then network-manager-applet. Then we have wireless_tools. Then we have WPA_supplicant. Then dialog. And we have OS-prober. And we have also mtools. We have DOS, FS tools. and then two development packages. One is base-devil, and the other one is linux-headers. So make sure the packages are wrote down correctly, and when you're ready, you just hit enter and accept the defaults by hitting enter and proceed with installation by hitting enter. So it's going to take a moment to download and install the packages, and I'll be back when it's done. So there you go, the packages are now installed. So I'll clean up the terminal, and now we can proceed to installing grub. So we'll type in grub-install. Now we need to specify the machine type. So we'll type in --target equal x86_64-EFI. This is the machine type we are installing on because it's a UEFI system. Then we need to define also the grub directory. So --EFI-directory equal. If you remember when we partitioned the disks, we created the EFI directory, which is under boot EFI. So we'll type in here /boot/EFI. And then we define the bootloader ID. So we'll type in --bootloader-ID equal grub, all in capital letter. And when you're ready, you just hit enter. No error reported, that's fine. So now we need to generate the configuration file for grub. So we'll type in grub-mkconfig, then -o and /boot/grub/grub.cfg. So we are outputting the content on the configuration file in the grub.cfg file under the grub directory, which is under the boot directory. And then we'll just hit enter. And there you go. So the base install is done. So we can exit the installation and return to the installer by typing in exit. And now we can unmount all the partitions by typing in umount-a and hit enter. We get some errors here. That's fine. We don't need to worry about that. And now we can reboot the system. Go ahead, boot your installation, log in with the root user and the password we created before, and I'll meet you back at the login prompt. So there you go. I booted up my Arch installation here and everything worked fine. The grub bootloader was correctly installed. So now we can proceed to the next step, which is activating the internet connection. And for that, we'll type in systemctl start network manager with capital N and capital M and hit enter. Now, because I have an Ethernet cable, I have already an IP, but if you have Wi-Fi, right now you will type in nmtui and hit enter. Scroll down to activate a connection. Here you'll see a list of networks. You can select yours, enter the password, and you'll have an IP as well. So I log out of the program here. And the next step is to enable Network Manager so that it can be started the next time the machine boots up. So we'll type in systemctl enable Network Manager and hit enter. And let's check the IP by typing in now IP space A. And I have an IP here ending with 188, so I'm set to go. So I clean up the terminal and move to the next step, which is creating a new user. So I'll type in now user add -m, which is going to create the home directory for this user. Then -g for the group, then wheel. It's going to be the wheel group, has to do with the sudo. We'll configure this later. And then the desired username. So in my case, my name, and hit enter. Now let's give the user a password. So we'll type in passwd and then the username and hit enter. Enter a new password and retype it. Now we need to give the user sudo power. So to do this, we'll type in editor, all in capital letters, equal nano, and then sudo and hit enter. We'll scroll down until we find the wheel group. And we need to uncomment the first one, which says all equal all. So we delete the hashtag. And then Control O and enter to save the file and Control X to exit the editor. So I'll clean up the terminal. The next step would be to install the graphics driver. So let's type in pacman-s. So if you have an Intel card, you will type in now xf86-video-intel. If you have an AMD card, you will replace here Intel with AMD GPU. And if you have an NVIDIA card, you will type in NVIDIA, and the second package is NVIDIA-utils. So because I'm on VirtualBox here, I don't need to install graphics as they are controlled by the virtualization software. So I can delete this command here and we can proceed to the next step, which is installing the display server. So we'll type in pacman-s and the display server is xorg and hit enter. Accept the defaults by hitting enter and proceed with installation by hitting enter. It's going to take a few seconds here to install the packages, should be done fairly quickly. There you go. So I'll clean up the terminal. And the next step is to install the display manager. So the display manager depends on the desktop environment you want to install later. So in the previous video, I installed GNOME, and in this video, I'm going to install KDE just to make a change. So the display manager for KDE is SDDM. So I'll type in pacman-s and then SDDM. If you want to install GNOME, I remind you, you would install GDM in this case. And then just hit enter and proceed with installation by hitting enter. There you go. I'll clean up the terminal. So the next step is to enable the display manager so that it can be automatically started when we boot the machine. So to do this, we'll type in systemctl enable. In my case, SDDM. If you have GDM installed, then you'll type in GDM here and just hit enter. There you go. And the next step is to install the desktop environment. So there are, of course, many desktop environments here. The last time I installed GNOME, this time I'll install KDE. So I remind you, if you want to install GNOME, you can install with pacman-S, then GNOME. This is the base package. And then you have also GNOME-extra, which installs some extra things in the GNOME desktop environment. But in my case, I want to install KDE. So I will type in Plasma, which is the first one I need. And then I have a few optionals. I have KDE-applications. If you want to have also user directories like photos, videos, and so on, you can install also xdg-user-dirs. And another package which you can install is packagekit-qt5, which is useful if you plan to update the system via the Discover Software Center. And when you're ready, you just hit enter. Accept the defaults by hitting enter. One more time, enter. And one more time, accept the defaults. One more time and proceed with the installation by hitting enter. So it's going to take a moment to download and install everything, and I'll be back when it's done. So there you go. The packages are now installed, so we can reboot the machine and we will be greeted by the KDE login screen. So let's reboot the machine and I'll meet you back on the KDE desktop. So there you go, guys. We are now in KDE and the installation was successful. So let me first pull up the terminal. The first thing I always do is to check for updates. So I'll pull up one terminal here. And I'll go full screen and increase the font size so that you can see better. There you go. So we'll type in now sudo pacman-syyuu to upgrade the database and the packages. Enter the password and hit enter. There is nothing to do. The system is up to date and we are ready to go. So let's have also a look at the file manager, which is called Dolphin in KDE. And I'll center the window here and I'll right click on the home partition and click properties. And as you can see here, we are using the home partition we created on SDB1, which was our second disk. In an upcoming video, I'm going to also take care of the post installation on KDE and GNOME to adjust some things in KDE. So stay tuned for that.
So there you go. This is how to install Arch Linux with a root and a home partition on a separate hard drive. In the next video, I'm going to also cover a little bit an after install. So, when we install Arch Linux, I covered a lot of tutorials about how to install it, but I want to cover also a little bit also what to do after the installation. There are some things that we can tune, like the trim, for example, for SSDs, Bluetooth, printers, and so on. This is coming out very soon. Anyway, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and sub to the channel. Subs really help us out, guys. And if there is anything specific you want me to cover or you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.